So it's 1995. I'm in the back of Fat Man Board Shop's first store, and I'm bawling my eyes out. I'm sitting on a bunch of folded up cardboard, literally just crying. It's about 11 o'clock at night, and I just don't know how I'm gonna get through the next day. You see, the next day was the day the loan payment was due, but that was also the day that rent was due. And I had just had a bunch of new products show up at all the wrong time, and I had spent all the money that was required. Let me take you back. You see, back in 1993, I got this idea. I got this idea to take my clothing line, which was called Fat Clothing Company, P-H-A-T, and I wanted to turn it into a skateboard, snowboard shop. And that idea came from a road trip that I was on to a snowboarding contest where I'd stopped at this shop, the shop in Canandaigua, New York, called Hard Pack Snowboard Shop. And I was selling my clothing there. And the owner, Tim, had mentioned to me while we were doing this, he said, "Hey, do you want to go ride?" And I'm thinking, of course I want to go ride. I got my board in the car, which I always had my board in the car. And I'm like, "What time's the shop close?" He said, "The shop closes at 5. I look at my clock and I'm like, I can't make it at 5. He's like, "No, we can go as soon as we're done here with this order." He was writing me an order. That was pretty cool. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, wait a second, Tim, you got somebody coming in to look after the shop, to keep the shop open? Because you're the only one here. And he says, "No, man, I'll just close the shop and we'll go ride." My mind exploded. I mean, come on. Who has the freedom to just close the doors and go snowboarding? You see, I couldn't even do that. Even though I had my own business, like if I had a meeting to sell clothing or I was doing something, I couldn't just stop and go riding, but right there, he could do it. And right there, the idea was concreted into my mind. I needed my own store, Fat Man Board Shops. You see, I had Fat Clothing Company and, well, clearly I was the man, so sandwich those together and you had Fat Man. I didn't stop thinking about that. There wasn't 1 minute of every single day that I wasn't thinking about Fat Man Board Shops. I was doodling on paper what the store would look like. I was thinking of what brands we would carry. I was meeting with who would become my business partner, Steven, and I was saying, what could we do? How do we do this? And we were talking about trade shows, and we were booking meetings to go to these trade shows. We knew nothing, and we didn't have the funds put together to do this, but we had the idea. You see, the next 6 months of my life were spent with NCCC, which was the community college's business unit. Okay, they had a small business development center there, and I had one teacher, Mr. Nemi, and he took me under his wing and he was teaching me how to write a business plan because I was writing a business plan for Fat Man Board Shops. And they had projections and marketing plans, and it had all the stuff a business plan would have. And I'd never done something like this. I mean, come on, I'm 17 years old. What 17-year-old knows how to write a business plan? Probably none. And I'm doing all this, and as the business plan was completed, I had this masterpiece in my hand, and I'm taking it around bank after bank, family member after family member, trying to get somebody to believe in this awesome vision that I had. But nobody believed in my vision. Let's start with family members. They all said, "Oh, this is cool, but it's not a good idea, Chris. Like, you could lose all the money." And I was asking to borrow $70,000 because my projections had showed to open this store, I needed $70,000. Bank after bank had said no, most of them laughing me out of their office because who is this 17-year-old punk kid who's trying to borrow $70,000? But there was one bank in particular who told me about these loans called SBA-backed loans, Small Business Development Center loans, hence NCCC, Small Business Development Center, that I worked with to design this business plan. And this bank said to me, "Well, Chris, we love your idea, and we could give you this SBA-backed loan," which means the SBA-backed loan means the government's gonna back the loan if it's approved. "However, we need collateral." And I didn't even know what the word collateral meant, so I asked, "Well, what do you mean?" "Well, we need something of equal value to the loan to collateralize it. So if something happens, we have assets backing the loan." And I said, "Oh, okay. Collateral. Yeah, I've got a KX 125 dirt bike. I've got a 1986 Buick Skyhawk. Oh, and I got this amazing baseball and football card collection." But the bank said, "Kid, that's not really what we're thinking. We kind of need something more like a piece of property that would back it. Oh, so now I had the idea, we need property. So I went to my dad and I told my dad this whole idea. I got this bank, Dad, that's gonna back this, gonna give me this loan, and all I need is this collateral thing. And I know you have this house and it's almost paid off. And my dad totally shut the idea down. And my dad actually said to me, he said, son, you should just get a job at the factory, which was called Harrison Radiator. Now it went on to be Delphi Radiator, but at that time it was Harrison Radiator. But you see, my future wasn't going to be the same as my dad's. I didn't want to live the factory lifestyle. I had watched my dad struggle with this lifestyle. I'd watched him constantly struggle for money and always saying there isn't enough money to go around and shut the door, we're not heating the outside and all that stuff. But my dad shut me down, and his solution, and I know he just had my best interest, was I would get an interview over at Harrison and I could go do what Dad did. But that wasn't my dream. I went to everyone in my family and everybody told me no. It's kind of like that movie, Kids, you'll shoot your eye out. But there was one person that believed in me, and only one. And that person I like to refer to as the unconditional one. That person was my mom. You see, my mom didn't have any money, so I didn't even ask my mom. She had just seen this from afar. She had watched the hours and hours of me doing the business plan. She had heard me come home and say, oh, that bank said no, this person said no, Uncle Jim said no. She had heard all these, but she had then heard that I had hope because there was this one bank that would do it. And when I explained to her that this wasn't gonna happen, it was a dumb idea, I should just listen to my dad, she got an idea. You see, she did have one asset. And that one asset was literally the house that we lived in, which was a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom, about 700 to 900 square foot ranch that me and Mom lived in. My mom had gotten the house through the divorce. When her and Dad divorced, she got to keep the house, and Dad went and bought another house and got remarried. So this was the only thing my mother had, literally. The only thing she had outside of the car and the clothes. And the house just so happened to have about $70,000 in equity. And my mother had me explain the projections and in the business plan, although she didn't really understand it, I'm sure, but she acted like she did, and she was so excited about it. And she said, well, Chris, what if I put this house up for collateral? Do you think they'll accept that? And I didn't even hesitate. I didn't even say, oh, Mom, you can't do that. But when now, looking back, I'm like, Mom, you idiot. I can't believe you risked the house for this crazy idea I had when I was 17 years old. I was a punk snowboard kid. I knew nothing about business. But she didn't say that. And I took that idea, and I took that one thing, that hope, and I ran back to the bank and I said, here's the house. They did the appraisal. They approved the loan. My mom risked it all. She put the only thing she had on the line so that her punk snowboard kid, this guy right here, could chase his dream, and it was a big dream. Fat Man Board Shops opened November of 1994. So much happened after that. I had ended up buying out a partner, but that was the dream. Fat Man Board Shops originated in 1994. Today is 2024, and that business still exists. Google it, fatmanboardshops.com, and you'll see it. That's the store. Now, I sold the store in 2010, but it doesn't matter. I built that store up. That was my dream, my vision, my worthy idea. And it could have never happened if I didn't have one person believe in me. And one person was my mom. She's always believed in me, even though she's never had money, never had the means. She's never said, your idea sucks. She's never said, that's a silly idea. She has sometimes said, Chris, can't you just be normal in a roundabout way? Or can't you just calm down a little? Or can't you just be happy with what you have? And that was my mom's big thing. Can't you just be happy with what you have? But you see, my dream is different than hers. My dream's different than yours. My dream was different than everybody's, just like your dream is unique to you. We all need to chase our dreams. And we all need to understand that you can't let anybody stand in the way. And here's the fact, everybody will. All you need is that one person that believes in you. Remember the movie Rudy? I had the luxury of meeting Rudy, and Rudy had one person that believed in him. Do you know who that was? Actually, he had two, but his friend died. But he had one person that was a janitor. He went on to do big things. Hell, there's a movie about him. Maybe someday there'll be a movie about what I'm telling you in this story, but that business paved the way for everything in my life. That business I still look at as one of my biggest legacies ever. And that business could have never happened if one person didn't believe in me. Thanks for listening. But hold on, let me pause. Let me take you back to that late night when I'm in the back storage room of Fat Man, bawling my eyes out, sitting on a pile of cardboard boxes, which were all the product that just showed up. You see, back then, all the product was paid with COD, literally cash on delivery. None of the stuff like today. I had to write checks or pay cash for those goods. But you see, on the first of every month, I had two really big bills due. One was my rent check, and one was the payment to that bank for that SBA-backed loan. And if I didn't pay that SBA-backed loan, the bank would foreclose. And if I didn't pay my rent, they would shut my doors. So those were really two vital bills. But you see, I still needed product. And this product that showed up was the new season's goods. I needed it to sell so that I could pay rent and so that I could pay that loan payment. But timing's everything. And I was sitting there crying because I just didn't know how I was going to get through the next day. Now, I don't remember exactly how I got through the next day, but I can give you an idea. The next day, God brought customers into the store, and the next day, I had enough sales to just squeak by. And you know what? Just squeak by was almost every single month in those early years. It was always just squeaking by. It was never money just overflowing. Matter of fact, let me give you one other story. There was one time of the year that there was a lot of money. And an interesting story going back to my mom. We had this little ritual that we did. And it was usually done right after Christmas, usually first part of January to celebrate the new year. We would go into Mom's safe, which during the busiest season, which was the Christmas season, I would take money from the registers and I would put all the cash and I would give it to my mom and she would put it in the safe. And the game was we wouldn't look at it. I knew how much every day went in, but I wasn't keeping track. So January, when me and my mom sat down and she cracked open that safe and we pulled out all these envelopes, and they were just big envelopes taped shut, and every one of them was filled with cash, and we would count it all out. $10,000, $20,000, $30,000. That was such a victory lap. And you know who got to celebrate in that victory? It was just me and my mom. Every year we did this. Every year we counted that money up. And no matter how much it was, $10,000, $30,000, $50,000, that was the money that was gonna seed the next year's product. That was next year how we were gonna expand and double our size. That was next year how we were gonna open location number 2. That was next year how I was gonna pay off debtors. That moment was that celebration that made it all worth it, that made all those nights crying in the back room, wondering how you're gonna get by, that made all the squeaking by worth it. You see, the one thing they don't tell you in business school or any entrepreneur class is how hard it really is. The one thing they don't tell you is how you're going to fail. The one thing that they don't tell you is how you're just barely gonna make it. And sometimes you're not. And they don't tell you how that failure, that not making it, is exactly what you needed at exactly the right time. Folks, Fat Man may have made it, but I had a lot of other businesses fail. I had Foxy Girl, I had Lurkin Threads, Lurkin Syndicate. I had all sorts of businesses just not make it, jump off the moon. And every one of those failures at the time seemed like a devastating blow. And every one of those failures taught me the one thing I needed to know. And that one thing I learned every time was how to make it to the next day. Sometimes it's not about where you're gonna be 5, 10, 15 years as an entrepreneur. It's about how you're gonna have enough money to make it to the next day, and then the next. And then the next. And that is the journey of every entrepreneur I've ever met. And then someday, you're sitting in a chair just like this and you're looking back and you're saying, wow, I can't believe where I'm at today. But then when you really start counting those days and thinking back, you realize none of it was easy and none of it ever will be.